This morning. I know there are a lot of important places you could be at your jobs with your kids, doing all the busy things that you do. But thank you for coming. Thanks for taking time off school to be here. But this country only works if we have an active democracy. And democracy is hard work. And this campaign knows how to work hard and to turn out the vote. And I know, given the grassroots army that you all embody, that Steve and Suni have built here, that we'll do well in this state. You know, there's a way to win elections, and it's called talking to voters one-on-one. It's called having leaders in the counties that inspire people, that tell you who the candidates are, what their records are, what their background is, what they're going to do for you. And so we've tried to run our campaign as a grassroots effort, not just rallies with 30,000 people in a private jet, but real relationships, really getting to know people. And the result of that has been that we've had Americans travel state to state and tell other people in other states who Ted Cruz is. And the most inspiring thing to me about being on the campaign trail is seeing friends from Louisiana and Iowa and Texas and California and on the East Coast go to other states, travel to the Midwest, travel to the South, travel out West, and phone bank and walk walks. And so after the first few states, when I'd met a couple of people, and then maybe 5 states later, I'd see them again in one of our offices, that's when you know that this big country of 330 million people is getting smaller and smaller as we band together to explain what Ted will do for this country. And Ted has always said, as Margaret Thatcher says, as she said once, we have to make the argument to the American people on principle, on policy, to win the argument, and then you win the vote. And that's exactly what our people have been doing. This election is an enormous opportunity to tell our friends and neighbors that the policies of the left do not work. Think of all the things that Obama promised this country that he would do to minority groups, African Americans, to young people, for women. And the results have been exactly the opposite. The minimum wage has stayed very low. We have students who are graduating from college who don't have job offers. The African American community has seen their incomes go down, and single working moms have had their health care premiums skyrocket and their wages go down. For the very people that the left claims that they're going to help, life has gotten worse. And you know what the other thing that's happened is? The top 1% have been doing better and better, which is, it's okay, it's a great thing. We want people to be able to seek out and reach the American dream. But when it's being done because of low interest rates, because of over-regulation, and that the only people that can succeed are big businesses that have tons of lobbyists and lawyers and accountants, that's not the private sector that we all signed up for. And the policies of the left have benefited the big. Big government works great with big business. And as we travel this country, Ted and I have met so many small business owners. Ted's family came from a small business. His father started a small business. My father is a dentist, ran a small business with his dental practice in a town of 40,000 people. Mm-hmm. The people that are getting crushed across this country are small businesses and entrepreneurs. Did you know that there are more business failures today than there are business formations? That was not true before President Obama took office. Yep. This is the main issue of the day, and it's the reason that Ted is campaigning on jobs. Job creation in the private sector is his #1 priority. Our constitutional freedoms and liberties being upheld, and the security of our nation being paramount and foremost. But let me tell you just a little bit about Ted, because I know for the next 2 months, is it 2 months? Less than 2 months. How do you know the date count, Steve? Well, I know it's June 7th, but we have, how many days? 7 weeks. 7 weeks. That's like, less than summer vacation. We have 7 weeks to educate New Jersey voters about who Ted Cruz is. And we have been very, very judicious to spend our time and our resources in states where we can get that done. And the way that we do that is through you. There's no other way to win elections than through you, because Ted often says he can't win this election, but we can. When we bind together, we can. So let me give you a little bit about Ted personally and about who we are as a couple, so that when you go talk to people, you know the candidate. It's not just jobs, freedom, and security, but it's someone who you know personally. Ted and I met 16 years ago. And I grew up in California. I've been in Texas for 12 years. But I did grow up in California to parents who were a small town dentist, a dental hygienist. We had a small little farm. My brother and I spent a lot of our summers and afternoons after school weeding corn and picking berries and trimming trees. I don't think my dad ever has had one employee that's helped him on that property. It was the four of us. And we mowed the lawn, and I cleaned my mother's house while she cooked. It was a great lesson in hard work. And my parents really practiced what they preached. They're leaders in their church. They supported our school. And they were missionaries. They always took off about a month a year and went to a third world country. And having the opportunity sometimes to travel with them, we went to Nigeria, to Kenya. They spent time in Asia. I saw as a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old that most of the world does not have the privileges that we do as Americans. And I think there's one reason. We have 3 things in this country that are so beneficial. The first is a private sector that, free of government regulation, can be very vibrant, can allow people to take risks, to start businesses, to benefit from that risk or to suffer the consequences, but to start again and to gain access to capital. The second is that we have a judicial system that generally upholds the contract of law. We know that we can go somewhere and that there is justice, and we need to keep it free of corruption. And the third is that we have an ability to vote freely. We have a democracy, and we need to ensure that our political system stays free from corruption. And so when Ted came to me a couple years ago, because it's been almost 2 years this summer, when he started to think maybe he needed to be in this election, because the real problem in Congress is we have no leadership in Congress, and we have no leadership at the top. And when he came to me, I thought, the important thing is that for this whole world, that we preserve these 3 tenets in this country, because we are the beacon of freedom. We lead this world in the private sector, in our judicial system, and in our political system. So I had the opportunity to see that as a kid. Ted was raised in a very different family. His father came here as a fighter for freedom from Cuba. He had experienced firsthand being tortured for his beliefs. He was almost killed in a Cuban prison and escaped here to the United States. So elections for Rafael Cruz, and many of you may have had the chance to meet him. I know Steve's been very active with Rafael. Elections to him are the way that we protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. And when you think about how quickly things have changed in the last 8 years, we need to remind ourselves of the importance of this election. Ted's mother was the first in her family to ever go to college. She grew up in Delaware. Her family were factory workers. She graduated in 1956 with a degree in math. When we understand the importance of education for our kids, that's where we will find a better future. And we must prioritize every child in this country having access to a quality education.
Yeah.
So in those 2 backgrounds, when I met Ted 16 years ago, I knew I'd met more than my match. And what I loved about Ted was that this was a person who was going to question the status quo, who was going to always do the right thing, who had the courage to do it, who had the brilliance and the conviction, was articulate to be able to get it done, and who was going to take on things that other people would think were too big and impossible, because Ted understood the issues of the day, that these things are countries too important. And people ask me sometimes in the press this last week, did I ever expect Ted to be running for president? I don't know. I certainly didn't expect he would this soon, but I knew I was marrying somebody with these inspirational principles of knowing that if we band together, one individual, a group of individuals, an army of individuals can make an enormous difference. And that was an inspiring thing. So as you have seen, Ted is a person of great principle. He was raised learning the Constitution at the dinner table. How many families do you find today sit down for dinner on Wednesday night with their kids and teach them the Constitution? Because he learned it so young, he not only memorized the words, but he really understood throughout his school years, his young grade school years, the meaning of the amendments and the history and the context. And as you see him talking, you can see that he has a deep understanding of this. Ted's also incredibly principled in his faith. And he understands the separation of church and state. He understands that our documents were inspired by a Judeo-Christian nation, but that our nation was founded on freedom of religion for everyone, which is so important. The first quality I learned about Ted was how principled he is because of those things. The second is the courage that he has, that we've seen him enact over and over in the Senate. And some people ask me if he's likable and why do people not like Ted. Ted has had the courage to fight for you in a Congress that has an 11% approval rating. And some people think it's less than that.
Yeah.
The last thing that I want to share is just how thoughtful he is. A lot of times when you look at people professionally and you see them in the eyes of the news media, you don't see those quiet moments. Ted is unflappable. He's a happy warrior. He's at peace. He knows what he's doing. He has such a command of the issues that he always has time to tell a joke, to go watch a movie, to be thoughtful at home. Right before those South Carolina debates, which were months ago now, but 1 hour before, he came running into the hotel room. And I thought, surely he must need something. These were, tense moments we've been preparing in the afternoon. And he was simply coming up just to bring flowers and chocolates because the next day was Valentine's. That was I want you to know, as you go work so hard for our country, that you are working hard to elect someone who is more than capable, more than ready to lead this nation on day one, who has a firm grasp of the principles that we all believe in, who will never let you down, who will have the backs of law enforcement, who will prioritize jobs for your kids in the private sector, who will protect our constitutional freedoms, not his viewpoint, but the Constitution, and who will work hard to ensure that we have the strongest military this world has ever seen, will use the bully pulpit of peace to ensure that we defeat radical Islamic terrorism and that we keep our country safe. Leadership, we need you to go out and work. We will be working 18 hours a day. We need you to join this grassroots army. We have a big day next Tuesday, and we're going to campaign hard on the East Coast. We have a fabulous May where we've got a number of states across the West. We have won states all across this country, from Maine to Alaska to Texas to Kansas. We've swept the last 5 elections in all different parts of the country: North Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Wisconsin. These are different states. These are states that some are really conservative like Utah, some are purple states like Wisconsin. Ted is uniting this party. We will keep doing that hard work right now till June 7, so that when we hit New Jersey, you'll have 51 delegates for Ted Cruz.
Yeah.